Hello, and welcome to What Moves Us, the podcast where we ask, what moves us? Or more accurately, what's going to move us in future?
We look at debates, themes, and decisions of the minute that will impact on the way we get about in the future. Hi, Liam. How are you today?
I am good. I'm very excited for our interview with our even newest member.
So, who is our newest member? Would you like to introduce them to the podcast?
Yep, so we've got Philip Oliver, who's managing partner of Eureka Europe, who's joining us from near to you, Edinburgh.
Yes, Scotland is the best. So, hi, Phil. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, Johannah. Thank you so much to you and to Liam for hosting me on this podcast for the Innovate Group. So it's really an honor and lovely to be able to just talk things innovation.
All things innovation, that's what we like. So, would you like to give yourself your full introduction?
Yeah, we were talking about this when we so my name is Philip Pozzo di Borgo-Oliver, and that back end name is it's a French Corsican name. So that's part of my backstory, I suppose, because I'm half English, half French. I grew up in South Africa and I was born in Singapore. So there's my kind of international background in a nutshell, really. Yeah, and I'm managing partner of Eureka Europe. We're a consultancy that helps organizations to build their own innovation muscle, as we like to say, effectively teaching and training and coaching a particular way of innovating that has been proven. And we can probably talk a bit more about that in a moment. But yeah, based in Edinburgh. And we are a sister company to our colleagues in North America and Canada, but called the Eureka Ranch. And that's kind of the origin of our name as Eureka Europe here. So we are a separate company, but working really closely together with the same single objective to make innovation something that can be learned and taught and basically adopted at scale for organizations in all kinds of sectors.
Right. I was going to ask, yes, was there a Eureka other bits of the world, but you've answered that question. So I guess I'm going to ask, well, maybe a left field question up front, but does Eureka mean the same thing internationally?
Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't thought about that. Well, so
Does
for
it
me,
exist in
in the
Corsica?
cliched sense. No, I don't know exactly. That's a really good point. I suppose with its Greek roots, as far as I understand, that's kind of the universality of it. But yeah, so I always think of it as the sort of stereotypical in the bath moment, kind of going, I have an idea. Um, and I once spoke with a client about that and said, you know, think about your teams, think about your clients. They don't sort of sit around in a bathtub all day waiting for ideas, do they? So how do we help them have bigger and bolder ideas on demand? So when they need them, and good ideas that you can sort of build on quickly or test and validate quickly. So Eureka for me means a bunch of things, and I think it starts with that sort of big exclamation mark moment.
See, it was interesting. I could never help myself because I had to Google it because thinking about that moment in the bath, I sort of seemed to remember something at school, sort of like it was because the definition of I found it, wasn't it?
That's
It's
it,
exactly
exactly.
that is exactly that's exactly what eureka means. I found it. So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you found the answer or you found the solution or the innovation. So that's fantastic.
Quite right.
So I'm curious before we get on to your approach and your and how you train people. I'm curious to hear what type of organizations you work with. Is it sort of like in the startup field or is it with big corporates to help them innovate? Because I know working with lots of people, it's difficult stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right, Johanna. And I think it's a great question. I was just speaking to a colleague in South Africa yesterday, who we were talking about the same thing. Well, she asked me really the same question as, who do you work with? And I think that the simple answer is you could work with any number of organizations and individuals, all the way from individuals to big corporates. And indeed, um, my colleagues here in the UK and in the US certainly have. In fact, the approach we have used has gone across well over 150 different sectors. and corporations, very big names that we can touch on some examples in a moment, but and also very small businesses and charities. And we've worked with accelerators and sort of, for example, Scottish Enterprise and private organizations that are trying to help startups find their way with the idea that they've got. So their Eureka moment. How do we help them to go from that moment, whether it's in the bathtub or somewhere else, to something that actually matters, something they can commercialize, something they can actually take to the big wide world, whatever that may look like. So it's super scalable. However, I would say our sweet spot is working with organizations that probably are already growing, may have 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 people looking to scale, or indeed larger organizations or divisions of bigger companies that are wanting to do something different.
And do they decide they need to be better at innovation and come to you, or so how is that first interaction?
Um, that's also an interesting question. Again, I was thinking about that because I suppose innovation, well, means a lot, I suppose, to different people as well. So it's worthy of a definition at some point. But that question of innovation probably comes down to two things most times. It's um, achieving some kind of growth ambition, even if it's going from zero to something, some kind of tangible um, first prototype, shall we say. So it's probably around products, it's about services, could be about business models. And then innovation is also sometimes about another thing, which is kind of just fixing a problem or improving something that that is already in existence, like a product or a service that you just want to make better. So that also includes a really important factor, which I think is not to be ignored, which is fixing things that get in the way of people doing great work. And so the broad innovation or the broad approach to innovation that I would take covers all of that. And how they'd find us would probably be really a conversation to find out where they are at that point in time. So what is it that they're trying to achieve? Is it something that is a brand new idea that needs to be taken to market with less risk? Is it something that they're trying to strip costs out of and get it again into the hands of consumers or maybe another business? We might meet them there. But it could also just be, we have an innovation system. We're actually pretty good at innovating, and we just want to get more systematic. We want to do this better, and we want more of our people to actually know how to do this, and not just a group of people in the back office with some good ideas and some MBAs. And so that's the multiplicity of conversations that we might have as Eureka Europe with our clients or prospective clients. We can meet them in a number of different places, I think.
See, that's really interesting definition and explanation, because when most people think of innovation, they immediately think of technology, don't they? A new product or something. They don't think of sort of like the cultural nuances within innovation or the systemic approach to innovation. So so perhaps you'd want to expand on that and sort of like how your approach works in innovation with those through those lenses.
Yes, of course. So I think probably just to give it a label, it's a name. It has this approach is called innovation engineering, and I probably need to pause right there and say that the originator of the concept is a man called Doug Hall, and Doug Hall is a chemical engineer by training, and had a career at Procter and Gamble, where he left after just under 10 years, becoming a master inventor and shipping sort of record-breaking 9 new products in 12 months, with sort of 10% of the cost and 16% of the resources traditionally used to get those ideas out to market. And he he decided afterwards to set up a consultancy of his own, and effectively to be an innovation guru to the big organizations. He knew his approach that he'd refined there had value, and he knew that it would be a powerful way of actually innovating big ideas. And that's what he did. So for some 10, 15 years, and indeed to this day, he and his team at what's now called Eureka Ranch, just outside of Cincinnati, do exactly that. They help to basically find and fast track and filter big ideas, so that whether that's for the likes of Nike, whether that's for the Disney Institute, whether that's for GSK, Toyota, that's what they do. But Doug had an interesting moment of reflection along that journey, which was, this is great. We're doing really well as a business. We're on American Inventor, we're on Backyard Inventor. You know, this is all working nicely. However, my ambition, Doug said to himself, is that everybody should be able to learn this. This is not rocket science. These are simple principles that work really well and that I've learned and refined. And so innovation engineering came out of that. And having spent some time taking sort of a year off at Maine University, his alma mater, he basically codified the approach to innovation engineering all the way from having big and bold ideas to communicating them, very importantly, to stakeholders, to investors, to other team members, and commercializing those ideas, which is often a question of prototyping, but also and in doing so, bringing down the risk, driving down the risk 30 to 80%. And then finally, how do you lead an innovation project was the other question he asked himself. And how do you lead an innovation organization? What kind of culture do you need? And so this total system approach that he developed, which became innovation engineering, was the foundation for what my colleagues and I teach and coach and train for organizations of all stripes today.
So if I'm I'm going to say, if I'm a railway company now, I'm a train operator, for example, and I come to you and I say, sort of like, I want to, we're struggling to, to get our ideas off the table. We have lots of good ideas, lots of lots of people in the front lines say we'd like to do this, but we find it really difficult to get it off a pilot or something like that and scale it. What would your approach be to that type of question?
And it's a really very good question and a very common one, so to be clear. I think so. Drawing on my experience, and I should say I'm not an expert in the rail industry at all. I do. Some of my clients that I've worked with, my colleagues in London, are working on a very big rail infrastructure project at the moment, which will remain nameless. But so I would approach, and I think usefully, any sector, any client, with a degree of humility and almost informed ignorance, because the beating heart of innovation, I think, the way we think about it, is that the people that are closest to the work know the problems best, and they live those challenges. And so, without kind of getting to this, how we would sort of shape and formulate and sort of set up a consulting project like that, I think one of the things you've just mentioned, Johannah, would be the common problem of thinking that just having the idea is enough. That's the most important thing. It's a great idea. It's really important. I think the first thing we'd say is having lots of ideas is probably a better starting place, because what we see, and I'm sure you've seen this before, is the people or the team or the individual, often perhaps the highest paid person in the room, who has an idea and champions it, is likely to hold on to that idea for a long time if they think it's a good one. And what often happens is an idea outlives its, shall we say, its sell-by date. And by hook or by crook, we drag this poor thing along for months and months, being absolutely convinced that this is the way forward, without spending time learning stuff along the way. Fail fast, fail cheap, is a phrase that Doug Hall coined many years ago and uses all the time. And in fact, that's the philosophy behind innovation engineering: is you don't know what you don't know. If you really are doing something new or trying something new, even if it's just new to your team, let alone your business or your industry, then you have to be humble about that and know that we can't program it, we can't project manage it into the future. We have to run a series of experiments every day, every week, every month. And it can start within hours of having the idea. What can we go and learn? What can we test that we think would kill this idea, actually? Because if we don't do that, then we are likely to live with this idea for so long that eventually we kind of realize it's on life support, and we've wasted time, we've wasted money, we've frustrated people, and people have lost confidence in our ability to innovate. And all of that speaks to a culture where leaders really need to encourage experimenting and need to role model the mindset, which is we don't know what we don't know. I don't know everything. I might be a subject matter expert in rail, but I can't know everything. And if this is an interesting new idea, then let's figure it out together. So I think in a nutshell, it's making sure that the conversation, that you meet people in that place where they realize, first of all, that they need to go and learn something very quickly and do rapid cycles of learning in order to make that project progress or that idea come to life. And if it doesn't, that's a good thing. We go reach into the cupboard for the next big idea.
So I have a question of how you'd, well, come on, maybe a bit more to your work in rail in a moment, but how do you balance that with large corporations, rail included, where to trial an idea, you have to go through 6 months of process and form filling, by which time, obviously, the idea might be life expired, but you've only then just got permission to do it, and then you've got a year's budget to do the proof of concept or something, and then everyone's so caught into it, they all kind of convince themselves it's going to have to work because that's the one thing that we've got permission to try.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's just such a vivid example of the challenges especially in larger organizations, as you just described, Liam. And no doubt we've all lived that. I certainly have. Well, some of the work we've done actually has shown that probably about most ideas, when they go through the corporate grinder of you need to fill in the forms, you need to de-risk it, you need to demonstrate the next stage for budgeting. That whole process of stage gate management, whilst necessary, understandably, is actually all about risk reduction. Again, a good thing. But what it tends to do is it tends to water down and dilute ideas for a start. And some of the work that the Ranch and the Institute has done is pretty much illustrate that ideas through a corporate system tend to lose about 50% of their value. Now, imagine we took a different approach, and what if we said that actually we go and do a bunch of discovery that costs little to nothing upfront as quickly as possible, coming back to what I was talking about, rapid cycles of learning. What if we did that and we could demonstrate the feasibility of an idea, or we could kill that idea ourselves as the project leader, which is a novel thought, because most of the time that's not something that people are empowered to do. But if you could kill the idea and reach for the next one, which is why I was saying, if we have a large pool of initial ideas to draw from, we can feel less precious about the idea. And so we can set it aside and bring another one on and start working with that one. So I would say practically, Liam, that is never going to be solved in one fell swoop. If the system is what it is, you have to start to address what is the system itself that is forcing you to work on an idea for longer than it's really worth, in a way, just to justify the next step. Because if you put together, after having learned and after having sort of de-risked an idea by going to learn something and run some experiments, if you've got enough confidence in an idea to put a business opportunity recommendation together, that's really crisp, perhaps a page, perhaps 2 pages long, with some supporting information. That should be the first next step. And it shouldn't have to wait for something that is in the diary, in the corporate diary, in 4 months' time. And we only do it sort of 2.5 times a year, which is what happens, right? We have to work to those schedules. But if a team can be flexible and say, look, we've done some very low cost or perhaps free work on this idea. We know it's a great one. Here's our evidence for it. Can we just get enough money for the next experiment? Not for next year, just to go and learn the next things we know are needed to prove or disprove this idea. That's a different approach. That's a far more agile way of thinking. And it's not a natural fit with most corporate processes.
I was
You're
really
smiling, Liam.
No, I was just no, 'cause I really like some of the ideas and some of the things that we're exploring here because I quite like the idea of sort of like whenever you go into any industry, you like to be humble because you don't know what you don't know, and I think in rail sometimes there's all almost a bit of arrogance that we're special because because we're so safety conscious. There's lots of engineering, there's lots of language, which is the language of the railway, and that and that. But what in working in rail, what surprised you the most? What have you found out in your approach at being humble?
Yeah, I mean, I should say my experience in rail, I'm very new to the rail industry. The work that I've been doing is in a slightly different field with a large organization or indeed consortium, um, which has mainly been about working with senior leadership teams, to get really aligned on what's important for that team to be successful, especially between organizations. But what I did discover is both surprising and also kind of not, which is that, behind the difficulties and the challenges of large scale infrastructure projects, which often have a very political sort of dimension to them, because there's such a lot of money. Often it's public money, and indeed it's an infrastructure that is going to benefit a community or indeed the nation. So it has to be. It is a political thing by nature. But really, when you dig behind it, you just find people really wanting to do a great job, and that surprised me. But then it immediately reminded me that actually, oh, just to your point, Johanna, it's like we're all unique, just like everybody else, as the joke goes. Yeah. And really, that is the point. In fact, just yesterday, I was commenting on a post by a colleague. I want to give a shout out to Mark Groombridge, who um, uh, works for an organization. You'll find him on LinkedIn, but he's a safety leader, and he was doing a site visit as he does regularly. He was talking about in his post the cab of a crane operator, and in fact, even before the crane operator gets into his cab, he's got a mat on the floor to wipe the feet, so that all the way up into his cab, when he works in his crane, he's got a really clean, tidy space to work in, so that he can be he can see what's on the dials of the crane. He can be attentive to what's needed in the day, and that sense of pride, that sense of commitment to work is amazing. And I say this, it may sound disconnected from innovation, but we spoke a moment ago about culture, and my colleague Doug Hall, who'll be in the UK in June for a series of events that I'm running for him, with him, is basically making the point now that 45 years on, having invented amazing things for corporates and for smaller organizations, to him, the most important thing still is people, is how do you engage people so that those ideas that they've got for either new products and services that are going to delight your customers, or for fixing the stupid things that just get in the way of day-to-day work internally to the organization. How do you give people the skills, the mindset, the enabling culture to do that? it still comes down to that. And I think to kind of come back to your question about the rail industry, I think that it's understandable that a sector that is so safety conscious, so budget conscious, and indeed steeped in a history which kind of all began on these isles in a sense, it is often stuck in its own inner paradigm. And so I'll be perfectly honest, I was amazed to find something called the Rail Innovation Group in the first place, and really delighted by the energy that you and your colleagues and members bring to this sector. And I think that is just a fantastic place to start.
Oh, we'll take that. Thanks. Claim good credit for that.
You're welcome.
So I don't want to sound negative, but has anything else have in your interactions with rail, have things been surprising, or is it just sort of a cookie cutter of another big industry?
I think it's early days for me to be able to make a sort of assessment of that, but I think the French expression that more things change, the more they are the same. It kind of comes to mind. It's different and similar as well, and I just think that maybe the particular danger, maybe in the UK, and again, I'm already out of my wheelhouse here, but I'm just thinking that it could be that the politics of big infrastructure rail projects in particular, today it sounds like the conversations are just dangerously political and too much blowing in the wind of political change. Maybe we're seeing some stability now in this current government, but it's felt to me like it's been a bit of a football that's been kicked about, and I worry. I would worry what that does to people's own confidence and sense of purpose and meaning in the sector.
Yeah, I kind of I get that because I mean, speaking with many people in rail, particularly in the train operator world, is that as you say, people, they take pride in what they do. They want to change. They want to do a good job. But I think, the politics quite often gets in the way of that. And I think with current rail reform, everybody's waiting for something to change, and we're not allowed to change whilst we're waiting for that. And I think it's interesting to see how, whether whether this is an opportunity to do small experimentations, say, not focus on the big stuff, but try and do some of those small things, because not wishing to mention a rival podcast or anything, but my husband and I won't mention it, but my husband and I were talking about an interview that they were doing, and shall we just say it was a certain demographic in rail industry, all talking about, sort of like the first rail coming into privatization. And my husband was like, why are we still, talking about the bleeding obvious, which is we've got to deliver for the customer? And and that, why, he says, why are we, of course it's obvious, we're a service sector. So, but everything focuses on the infrastructure. And I said, but that's because all of this stuff, innovation, there is innovation in the infrastructure, there is innovation in the engineering, but actually where it really matters is what can we do for the customer. But I said, but all of that within rail is seen as being, fluffy bunny type stuff.
Nice
That's
talent, yeah.
important. And so so how do you fix that? Because that is that is the culture, isn't it? Not just about the engineering, not just about the safety, but innovating, the whole, for the customer has to be part of it, doesn't it? Because engineering should be responding to what the customer wants.
Yes.
Yeah, you're so right. It has to be a system approach, doesn't it? It has to be, the whole picture has to be designed with the end in mind. And I suppose the problem is the infrastructure, by its nature, just takes so long to get completed that it's kind of like, oh yeah, we'll get to that. I mean, yeah, it's years away. Why would we worry about that now? But to your point, even day to day, users of the current infrastructure, they need to be thought of, and that's certainly not fluffy. That affects probably hundreds of thousands of people every day.
So when we're thinking about that culture and that change and that, where have you had success? Sort of like in which industries have you seen that sort of like really change and you can see that difference?
Well, I think it's an interesting um, thing to pause on because just recently I was with a defense client that we've got, which is another sector that probably, to be perfectly honest, has had some parallels with the rail industry in terms of stop start, grow, don't grow, cut costs. Oh, actually, here we go. Uh, you got to treble the size of your business, and um, and I suppose a very small micro example of a success that I felt quite recently was in a conversation I had with a client in our defense clients organization that was just a one-to-one conversation. And having trained teams in that business to take on innovation engineering, to make it part of their culture, to run their projects and experiments and to shift their mindset in that direction. Um, I was really deeply satisfied about what I heard the the person play back to me in this conversation, which was really about how she'd adopted the things that we've spoken about and trained, and how she was really obviously making that her own. Um, changing the language a little bit, doing it slightly different, perhaps from the way we might have suggested it's done, but actually all of those things are signs for me in that one conversation of 45 minutes that you know 3-4 months down the line, her advanced training in innovation engineering is doing what it should always have done, which is to give her the skills and the confidence to start working differently, even in the context of an organization and a culture which has also needs to make some shifts. But just having enough confidence that these tools work, that the leader that has brought us in has given enough air cover. It's not a very good metaphor, but enough air cover to the team to say, you can do this. You can try these things. We'll allow you to experiment. Here are the boundaries for that experimentation, be it sort of budget wise or time wise. We're going to build a capability here. We're going to upgrade our capability, and we're going to start to adopt this as a way forward. And just seeing that sort of really coming out was a bit like sort of seeing a pencil drawing or a line drawing, black and white, sort of being colored in for me. And I just think that's really coming back to our point about culture. That was just a beautiful moment and a wonderful illustration, however small, that uh, it starts with people, and it starts with giving them the skills, the confidence, the systems to work, and indeed the leadership desire to change the culture. And all the way from American Express, that Doug Hall and the team back in the 90s helped to invent the American Express Centurion card, so the kind of by invitation only Amex Black, as it's called colloquially, featured in James Bond films and popular rap songs, etc. But that was a co-creation with American Express. And what was really interesting in that example is that it was a product, of course, front and center, for an organization that was finding its advantages eroded by uh, uh, hundreds of organizations coming in every year into the credit card sector. And so they thought, well, how do we differentiate ourselves? The first answer to that question was, we need something that just we need to invent a new category. And that's what they did in the American Express card, a super premium card by invitation only. But the thing that they quickly realized they needed to do was to reinvent the back end of American Express to support this. Because up to that point, it had been very much an administrative chasing down credit card payments type of business. Now they had to have a concierge arm. They had to have people who were trained in high level service support to demanding clients. And that required an equal amount of time and effort to reinvent than did the actual product itself. And so I think in that example of success is another illustration of it's not just the thing, it's how you bring people along and how you make that thing work in the customer space and in your own organization in order to make it successful and sustainable.
And that brings us back to where we started, in sort of terms of, sort of like, so I've got a good idea, why do I struggle to get it off? And a lot of the time it is because it's that, what is that, operationalization of that product, what's the back office function? What else needs to change in order to support that idea? And quite often we don't really consider that, do we?
Exactly, exactly. No, you're quite right.
So we're coming to the end, but just before we do end, perhaps you could tell us about, sort of like, as a small organisation, what challenges you have, because you have some big clients that you've mentioned along our conversation, and Liam's got
Yeah.
it up.
Well, I'd just like to add to that.
Go on then.
Do you practice what you preach internally?
Mm. That is an important question to have asked, and the answer is yes, absolutely. So, of course, we're not going to formally create projects and run experiments in necessarily very structured ways all the time. But in our language and in our meetings, um, you won't. It won't be unusual to hear someone challenge somebody and say, "Well, we need to go and learn something." Doug Hall has a mantra. If we're debating something for more than 15 minutes, you need to go out there and, and figure something out. Go and learn something either from a client, from a competitor, from the marketplace, whatever it is. We are wheel spinning, and we're basically living in the world of hypotheses here. So let's go and test something and become a bit smarter, as you would put it. So yes, we do. When I look back along the trajectory of innovation engineering from the last sort of say 35 years, uh, it's gone through, I think, something like 7 cycles of reinvention, always keeping the core principles, but but and most recently, Doug's own shift in perspective for him has been back to the people. It's about the people. It's time to stop the stupid is the phrase he uses a lot. And really it's about having a proactive culture. And so how do we get people to be proactive problem solvers? And that's the latest, if you like, generation or instance of innovation engineering, and an illustration of how, as an idea, as an approach, as a method, it evolves in and of itself. You had a question about small
Yeah, it's just
company,
as
big clients.
yeah, 'cause it's about,
Yeah.
your small company, big clients, sort of like how,
Yeah.
how challenging do you find that, and what challenges do you have?
Well, I think probably the way you framed it, I would say uh, the biggest challenge is for an organization, a larger organization, especially, to kind of look at a smaller company that wants to help it and kind of go, but you know, how are you going to do that? Like, what's your capability? If you are sort of 10 to 12, 15 people strong, what can you do for us as an organization of, I don't know, 30,000 people in sort of 6 different locations across the world? Well, the short answer is, if you put it that way, nothing. But if you if the question is a different one, if the question is how can you help this team or this division to start to make a shift in the way that they think and work as innovators or as people who need to be good at innovating, that's a completely different proposition. And if you back that with, first of all, a method or an approach like innovation engineering, that's definitely proven in its pedigree and its track record. But also with the approach that we take, the delivery mechanism, which is we're not the experts, you guys are the experts. And so all you have to do is leverage us. And what we're trying to do is work with your teams and coach them and train them. And in my defense example that I was quoting earlier, you know, they have some 50 people in the business that's been trained. The organization is certainly much, much larger than that. But that's the point of beginning. And after 18 months, 2 years, when you are starting to tip the organization into a different way of thinking, you will see those benefits. And so that would be the answer to a larger client working with us, is that actually it's your people who will be doing the heavy lifting, and we will coach them and we will support them. And it'll be a program, a journey, and let's just set realistic expectations for how long that's going to take, because it's about culture change, and that never happens overnight.
So you're a bit like, having sort of like a bit of a hammer or something in your toolkit that you can use to to help you along your journey or to put something together.
Yeah, well, like so many organizations that need help, it's about getting clear on where the starting point is, where what's going to make the most impact, and really getting clear what is it they're trying to do that needs to be different. Does it need to be different? Why does it need to be different? And I think for an organization like Eureka Europe, where we're coaching and supporting and we're training, we're building the competence and the capability inside their organization. I think that's the power. That's the real power of democratizing innovation in a way.
Great. Fascinating. How can people get in touch with you?
What, through you for a start? But
Everything's through us.
everything's through you. But no, by all means, you'll find Eureka Europe and myself on LinkedIn. And if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, it's just Philip with one L at eureka1europe.com. Philip at eureka1europe.com.
Excellent. Well, Phil, that was very, very interesting. And we will see you. Well, you remember now, so we'll see you all over the place.
Fantastic. I really look forward to that.
Thanks for listening to another episode of What Moves Us. We hope we moved you. For more episodes, you'll definitely want to subscribe to our channel.
Until next time.